I could hold on to my work, to being busy, to having responsibility, to having a team. There was a lot of busyness. And suddenly I wasn't busy. And I felt like, who am I if I'm not busy? And I would, pretend, oh yeah, I have a project. I would lie to myself, and I couldn't, back then, that's 15 years ago, I couldn't stand up for, I feel like crap right now.
Welcome, dear Business as Poetry friend. Today's guest is someone who knows what it means to burn everything down and rebuild from the inside out. Marijana Sommerfeld walked away from a corporate career, faced a breast cancer diagnosis, and came out on the other side, not just healed, but changed. She's an author, inspirational speaker, and the woman behind Reconnect by Marijana Sommerfeld, a space dedicated to helping people find their way back to themselves. Her work asks the kind of question that most people tend to avoid about identity, worth, and what we're actually building our lives around. I've been wanting to have this conversation for so long, and today we're going there. So, welcome, very warm welcome, Mariana.
Thank you, Christina. I am joyful and I'm happy to be here with you. And thank you for your invitation.
Oh, you're so welcome. And we've just been talking as we were warming up. We always have a little chit chat before we go into the conversation. We've been talking about what we've been feeling and what's happening in the world collectively. So it's we live in interesting times, energetic times, as I always like to say. And whether you believe in that or not, whether you're a bit more on the side of logic, you might still be feeling these energies affecting you. So, how have you felt and what have you observed personally in the last few weeks, months, and the beginning of the year, just to set the scene before we go into your story?
Well, I have experienced in the past few weeks, like heavy energies, like a lot of energy movement. Also, I feel that in my body, like my body is my communication vessel, telling me something
Mm-hmm.
is kind of off, and it doesn't have to be necessarily me. I'm feeling, sensing the energies around. And it's always an invitation to go deeper and then to feel like, okay, as you just said, identity, who am I? What is ready to be released? What is ready to be seen? And it's not something to avoid. And I've been doing that long enough to know that it's not healthy to suppress and to move on with life as it is. And this is also my guiding principle. Whatever shows up is welcome. Welcome it. It's a
Mm.
gift.
Yes, but it wasn't always like this, was it? And I feel many listeners will resonate with that as well. So if you're listening out there, sitting and thinking, "Oh, I really want to be more connected with my body. How do I do that?" Or maybe that's not valid for me. I have this job which doesn't allow me to do that. What would you say to them, particularly reflecting on how you started your career? And I know you've had lots of experience working with big names like Coca-Cola, Lufthansa. You were traveling a lot, had a lot of responsibility. So what was life then? And maybe what would you tell that old version of yourself if you can travel in time back to those days?
Oh, trust your intuition because it was always there. It was always there. And I can really see these, like the past version of me struggling and holding on to and pushing through and having to and must and showing up smiling even though I felt drained and taking over responsibilities, which is a good thing. I mean, we want to keep that. We want to keep that value, but we want to align it with what type of responsibility matches. And what I would tell people, or what I'm telling people, is to allow to feel. Our emotions are guides. And this is something I'm very good at feeling and sensing, and I was very good at suppressing. So I know how it felt when I was suppressing. And that's all the heaviness, and that's all the reactivity, and that's all the knowingness. You know this doesn't feel good, and you still move on. And if you
So
go,
why do you yeah, I want to jump in. Why do you do that? And maybe if you can give us a bit of context of what your job entailed and how that heaviness manifested physically for you.
well, why do we do that? Because we have a belief system, because we have an identity that if we don't do it, we're going to lose something. recognition, fear from being judged, um,
Money.
money, belonging. Belonging is a big thing.
Mm.
And that's what's underneath. That's what's driving us. There is a story underneath, and we don't know that once we don't look into that story and feel into what am I afraid of if I stop doing that? And that's a question everyone can answer honestly. And being aware about that is the first step. And I mean, I stepped out of corporate and I left. It was my decision. And I felt so ashamed
Why?
because I I wrote that in the corporate to calling in my chapter.
Mhm.
I knew this is enough. I can't continue like that. But it's kind of I need to change something. So I followed my intuitive guidance, but then I didn't have anything, like anything to hold on to. I could hold on to my work, to being busy, to having responsibility, to having a team. There was a lot of busyness. And suddenly I wasn't busy. And I felt like, who am I if I'm not busy? And I would, pretend, oh yeah, I have a project. I would lie to myself and I couldn't back then, that's 15 years ago, I couldn't stand up for, I feel like crap right now.
Mm.
I mean, being honest. I wasn't honest with myself, and
Yeah.
a deep shame came up, and shame about who we are. And
Yeah, and also personally about who you were. I think now you're
who-
speaking for the collective, but at the time you were just facing your own individual problem. And I want to ask you, what was that breakthrough moment? Because you mentioned corporate to calling, so we're gonna get to that in
Mm.
a minute. But also, I think in one of your blog posts, you mentioned something about the departure and how a friend gave you a postcard that said, "When will you choose you?"
Oh,
And I think
thank
that's so
you.
beautiful. And you saw that, and something clicked.
Yeah, we need the mirror. Be it a friend, be it a coach, be it a podcast. We need someone who asks a question and holds it up into your face. There was a friend of mine a few years before I left, maybe 2 years before I left. She saw me struggling and she wanted to see me happy. I mean, you want people around you who want to see you happy. And she asked that question and she came with that postcard from a Berlin bar. They had these postcards. And she's like, when are you going to pull the trigger? I'm like, what's she talking about? I'm like, and tears, I was crying. I'm like, oh, she's so right. I mean, it touched me deeply in my heart because she saw I need to change something. But the only person who can do that is me
Mm.
to
Yeah, and
decide.
I think that story comes up a lot with so many of the women on my podcast because look, you studied business, which is what you do, which I did as well. When you don't know what you're going to do, you go and live in a big city. You lived in Berlin. Well, I think was it a project manager or you were? I mean, it was that
Project
very
access
a
management.
lot of
Yeah.
juggling of responsibilities. You were traveling. I think you mentioned some destinations pretty much all over the globe, different
Mhm,
time zones,
mhm.
and project process management. And then you leave corporate. And I think for many people, that moment of leaving is, or accepting that they can leave is the scariest. So it's helpful to bring out these stories, but also to share the truth that, okay, you resign, but things didn't change immediately because that's when it sounds like the work actually started. And it's not like you just woke up one day running a successful business, was it?
No, and that's so important. And of course, now I'm more more smart about this because I also got guidance. I got all my trainings, and back then, what we are doing, and that's something we need to be really careful that we don't continue doing more of the same. And I continue doing more of the same, going into consulting business as a freelancer in process
Mhm,
management again, traveling again. And I wanted to avoid, as much as I cherish the traveling and I love the world and the connections,
mhm,
it was just too much for me. And I went back for another 3, 4 years in a freelance position and was this in between, like, okay, I can choose which project I take. But it was still the same energy that was running beneath. I was still pushing through. I was still doing things that were not aligned with me. I was in this analytical world and I didn't see the signs. There were signs all over inviting me to go into different directions.
Were they physical signs or more, symbolic, energetic? How did they come to you?
They came to me through projects that people approached me and said, "Well, we have a
Mm.
conflict in our team. Would you facilitate that?" And I was facilitating 100 workshops, and I was good in facilitating and listening, but it was all about these processes and improving. And then they approached me about, could you look into this dynamic? I'm like, okay, I can do that, but I didn't own it. Or I was in this group, what was it? Group dynamics seminar, and where we experience group dynamics without a topic, how they show up. And three people came to me, and it was 2014, and said, "You have something shamanic, or you're a healer, and I'm like, "No,
Oh, I like
no,
that.
no, I'm a consultant, business." And
We're clinging on to it for dear life, and that's very familiar to me as well, because I think there's an element of who am I without it, and what will people think of me,
that's
right?
the most important question. How will others perceive me if I uh, go into healing? Ooh, that's not tangible, kind of.
Ooh, woo,
Ooh.
shamanic, voodoo, woo, I'm gonna lose all my credibility. And I think that's on many people's minds. And that's why we talk about these things, because we want to say you will lose something, but you will gain something even bigger.
Oh, and I now have it on my website that I'm a healer and, transformational guide and healer. And I'm not healing anybody, but I'm creating these spaces so people can self heal. It's all about self healing. But it
Mhm.
took me like a decade almost to speak that out and to own it.
Mm.
And so there were many signs. There was this HR manager, C level, and he said, "Could you go into this big meeting of us and just watch?" And I'm like, because he felt that I perceive information. And I now I get it. I get it. That others did perceive what I didn't own back then. And it was part of the path. It's all good, nothing to judge, but I do feel we can, as we name it, collapse some timelines if we connect with this trust, if we connect with this identity, if we have people who are supporting us to step into this, who are cheering us up.
If you only had listened, right? Because I think people always will guide you through. For example, a lot of people come to me asking me about, can you tell me about speaking on camera or how you prepare for and all those things. And here I am saying, I'm a coach, my coach, my coach. And then part of me is thinking, well, maybe I'm a little bit something different. So it's as we go through your story, I'm seeing myself in parts. So that's why I really wanted to dive a little bit deeper into the science. And I think one of those that I mentioned when I read your story was about your body speaking as well, because that's a very big topic. And when you say listen, yes, listen to other people, but also listen to the
Mhm.
physicality, what your body's telling you. And you said that after you left that job, your body just collapsed and you ended up in A&E.
Yeah. And my body collapsed like several times. And then when the cancer diagnosis came, that was like the major collapse, like the signal of the body to stop. And that
Mhm.
was the stop sign for me to stop searching, to stop running, to stop searching on the outside, what we are conditioned to do. And that was, in hindsight, I now understand that was the time when my body and the connection to intuition was turned on immediately. It took me like 2 days. I didn't trust it all the time. It's not that I was like in full trust, but I was so immediately connected, like this resource that I went over all the time. Like, okay, we can do this once more, once more. I mean, probably many listeners will also relate to this. No, we can't, and we shouldn't. And I mean, we can, but we shouldn't. And this was the time when my body and my intuitive voice and my gifts spoke, like, were so visible. And also in hindsight, I can understand that even better.
Mm. But how, I think the subtitle of this series now is a turning point, because everyone reaches that. And I think collectively we're moving towards a very big turning point.
Mhm.
So was that your pivot or I don't like the word pivot, but let's say your turning point and
Yes.
people they wake up call and how I mean it I cannot even imagine how that must have felt because hearing those words and receiving that diagnosis, it's an extreme shock, you know. It's more than just a wake up call. It's a very serious condition. So how did what happened? I just want to know how you felt and if you can share something that perhaps could be helpful to someone who's either going through something similar or perhaps have somebody in their close proximity or circle that they want to help and they don't know what to do.
Well, that diagnosis feels or felt unreal. What is let's go 6 weeks before that. I felt something was off in my body. So
Mm.
many women find their like tumor themselves. Like I felt like I touched it. I'm like, this is not good. This doesn't belong here. So there's this intuitive knowledge and knowingness we have. And then after you get it like on paper, it feels like, is this again, is this something now happening within me? Is this my story? It's kind of a distance in the beginning and it takes some time to really face it and to feel like, okay, is am I done now? I mean, it's like is life ending now? Like the physical life? That's the question that probably most of us have. Because there's also outside there a very fear-based communication that this is the end. We're always fighting it. There is never something like, there are so many good stories, there are so many good outcomes, and we need to talk about those as well. So my like powerful moment was when I said, I'm accepting that. Acceptance. I'm not going to fight this. This is now the reality. And acceptance is one of our, I think it's the most powerful um, state we can go into, whatever it is. Because then it is there and you face it and you feel it and you cry and you have fears. And then you say, I'm accepting that. And the moment I accepted, I felt my power. It was like the project manager was back in the seat. I felt like empowered. I'm like, I'm gonna do this now. And I'm gonna go through this. And then I felt, no, this is not the end. I felt that message. No, this is not, I felt it truly within me, coming through me. And I'm like, okay, I'm accepting this. I'm going through this. I'm going through the medical system. And then I had to learn a lot to take my decisions. What is good for me and what is not good for me. That was the hardest part. That was the
Yeah.
hardest part because there is this fear-based system. Very helpful also. Very helpful. But we need to learn to trust ourselves. And that was a big learning for me to trust my intuition.
Yeah. And I know that you now work with many people. Some of them come from perhaps similar backgrounds where they have had to, they've received perhaps a scary diagnosis or condition that is affecting their life permanently, perhaps. So, what could you tell to those who are listening and are going through something like this? Where can they start? How can they help? What is, you know, because you said, of course, listening and intuition, that sounds good, but someone could be sitting there saying, yeah, that all sounds great, but where do I actually start? What practical help can I get beyond the medical treatment, which is the obvious route?
Yeah, I would definitely suggest the medical system also, especially in Germany.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah. I'm saying in addition to the medical treatment that
Right.
you're
They
getting.
offer a lot of like psychological support.
Mhm.
Um, I would definitely speak to someone whom I trust and who trusts me in the sense of that I can speak out whatever is on my heart, that it's not judged, that it's not being corrected, being wrong or something. Speaking out and connecting to these deep fears. I mean, that this is the deepest fear we can feel is that our life might be ending. And I mean, on a spiritual level, this is also something that is moving us beyond um, like physicality. But let's stay here in this physical world. I recommend having people around you, and that's not necessarily the family, because they have more fears
Interesting.
than you have. That's not necessarily the best supporters in the beginning. They have to grow into their own roles. And it find someone or find courses, groups. There's a lot of opportunities out there where you can show up as who you are. And what is most important for me, that the person that is listening to you is not knowing it better, because no one knows better. No one knows better. I cannot give medical advice. I can just say what I did.
Of
And
course.
I wrote a book about this. It's only published in German, but it's, we know, and going into trust, I feel it's the biggest invitation when the body is signaling something is off, to reconnect. We are disconnecting. It's a disconnection. Disease is disconnected from ease.
Yeah. And it's, you made me think, and of course, we're not giving medical advice here. This is very different. We're talking about the emotional, energetic element of it. Of course, you should go and see a qualified doctor. And I'll always be the first one to say that for any medical condition. But in addition to that, sometimes there are perhaps conditions that I've had which are not life threatening. Maybe they're not even that scary or serious to some people, but they do make you feel uncomfortable. And you do wonder whether it's a common cold or some infection or whatever, that you'll be okay. So you're not faced with a life or death situation, but you still sometimes tend to be a bit whiny and wonder why that's happening to you. And there was perhaps an older version of me that would have said, "Oh, there's nothing I can do," and power through. And there's a new version that's like, okay, maybe we can pause a little bit, see why that's happening now. Not make a big deal out of it necessarily for every time we counter cold, but just think about, is there perhaps a little sign that my body's giving you? Is there something that I need to receive? I think that's perhaps a healthier way to put it, not just immediately um start blaming or panicking, or I mean. And again, I depending on your diagnosis, I know this is really hard to do when you have something like a cancer diagnosis, but I'm probably speaking to those who get really frustrated with minor things and reminding them that that's, it's coming for a reason.
The body is talking to us. And
Mm.
it's not, I'm not putting that out and saying this had to be like, I mean, it was like that. So I'm not going into, you know, I'm not going into the guilt energy here. Like, because many people ask, why me? Why did this happen? These can be deeper questions you can ask yourself, but guilt energy is not helpful. Guilt energy is not helpful. It's kind of like moving on from here. Okay, I look back. I suppressed a lot. I don't want to do that. And it's not something that came to me on day one. I'm still there, like moving on and learning. But I feel still I'm repeating myself, the acceptance and finding someone. And I found people, and that's my intuition, that I could trust. I went through hypnosis first time. I found a hypnotherapist to support me on my healing journey. And I didn't read many books. So everyone has a different approach. I felt like in the beginning, it was more me being with myself. That was my best resource for me. And then I started reading later and got a lot of inspiration through books as well. There are so many good books out there. And I
Yeah.
feel we know what is speaking to us. We read this one sentence, and it doesn't have to be the whole book. It can be just one sentence that makes a difference.
Yeah, and I'd like to borrow that metaphor, because that's not just for health conditions. If you are in a place where you're probably deciding what's next, you're thinking that whatever you're doing right now isn't working. Perhaps it's your job, perhaps it's a relationship, perhaps it's a situation you're in. a project, a side hustle? And I've had loads of these questions. Like I'm even wondering what the next thing is for this podcast as I evolve, things move. And sometimes, as you say, we need to make space. And if we're holding on for dear life to old things, old identities, or whatever you want to call them, old projects, there's nothing new can come through because it's just not possible. So to me, it will be interesting to explore then how did that shift? Obviously we know there was a happy ending in your case. You were cleared, you survived, and now here you are doing something very different. But what was maybe from a career perspective,
Mhm.
what happened? Obviously you took some time off to heal, but when did work come back and how did you find your calling?
Well, my calling was within me, and through this experience, I wrote my first book. I connected with my inner creativity that was suppressed as well because I was very much in the analytical world. And so writing came to me and through me with ease. And what was interesting about this experience, that was already the new identity. It, 2 years later, 3 years later, 2018, it was published. And I started writing in 2016, not knowing where this is gonna, is this gonna be published? But I started writing and I experienced, and that's the conditioning. For the very first time I experienced that something was easy. No hustle, no pushing. It just came through me and I wrote it. I wrote it when I wasn't, when something was there to write it down. I didn't write when I didn't have something to say or to process. So that was a very important moment to realize when we are aligned now, when we talk in this, speak in this language, things get easy, the flow. And that was one of the biggest moments. And the second one was during my journey, I realized that I was not my disease. And I realized I don't even want to accept that identity. So that's something I realized also later, how strongly I was um, into this identity. This is not who I am. I'm processing it. I'm going through it, but that's not my identity. And I'm claiming to be healthy. And I know that week 1, week 2, I said, I'm healthy. I'm going to, riding my bike to get my chemotherapy. So I'm healthy. And I felt like I manifested that on an intuitive level, that this is who I was, even back then when, I was going through a severe disease. And that's
So it
also
almost
something.
yeah, it almost sounds to me like you were getting all these external tests or results and things telling you you are this, but you were refusing to identify with it, which I think that's a very good example because it can sound so abstract when we talk to people about
Mhm.
what is an identity. People can say, "Oh, I'm this, I'm a millionaire, I'm a millionaire." But why am I not a millionaire? Where's the money, right? It's not just about saying things loud and making yourself believe, pretend like you believe in them and thinking that, oh, if I just say this, it's going to become my reality. You're talking about something deeper here. You actually felt,
I
and it was
felt.
coming from you. You weren't forcing it. It was actually
Mhm.
something that you
Mhm.
genuinely identified with. I'm
Right.
sorry, there's no better word to
Right.
describe it, but maybe you can help me because I really want to help people who are listening understand what we mean when we talk about identities and choosing and saying things like I am or
Mhm.
I have,
Mhm.
you know?
And that's what I wrote also in the book. And now when I reread it, I'm like, wow, you had such a
Mm.
connection to what identity means without even speaking about this, like the way we do now. And there was this difference, and I felt it in my body because everything was around disease and sickness and hospital in German Krankenhaus, Krankentransport. It's always this sick, 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 sick. The wording was always in there. And I talked to my hypnotherapist and I'm like, this is kind of pulling my energy down. I know this is the way, we relate to it, like a hospital for diseases, for sick people. But I feel like the more I read these words, I feel like my energy is going down. And she explained to me that's suggestions. That's creating your reality. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So, and I felt the health was in my body. I committed I want to be healthy, and I committed I'm going to heal. And I saw that. I was also working intuitively with pictures. And I felt the difference between saying I am or I have. I feel it. We can feel if I say I am fearful. Well, my energy drops right away.
I have a fear. How does that sound?
I have a fear right now. It's observational.
It feels like something you may not have in some point, right? Because I can choose to have or I can choose to leave it, right? I have a cup in my hand and I don't anymore because I've left it on the table. I think that sounds very simplistic, but I think that's the lesson in this story is
Mm.
really about empowering. And this is something that I've been writing on my Substack as well a lot this week. So I honestly think that these things are not random. The fact that we're talking about this now is because somebody out there, our listener, needs to receive that message that you can choose. And okay, you've given your example with a health diagnosis, but that's the same with your work, with the circumstances, with your business, with your social media, whatever is important to you right now, your relationship or family. And I just think that we couldn't stress that enough. But as you say, it's a process and it's not something that you can find out with one conversation, with one discovery call, with one with one podcast, even although what we're hoping to do here is just to plant the seed so that
Mhm.
you, my dear listener, can then go away and think about, oh, something in there that Mariana said or Christina said. Actually, I think there's something in it for me. And that's the beauty of it. But I want to jump right back into what you do now, Mariana, as we approach the end of the conversation, because someone might be listening and thinking, well, what does she do now? Does she heal people? How does she work? Does she work only with people who've gone through cancer diagnosis, or is it broader? And how does your corporate experience, which you said 15 years, there were challenges, but it was very useful experience. You operated on a very big scale, and that's not to be underestimated. So is there something that you're perhaps taking from that old self instead of just saying, nah, that's me, I'm throwing it out and boom?
No, I integrated that. I did have a time where I was pushing that away, like not more, not more, not more, because I had the story that this is the responsibility for me being stressed out. I didn't own back then that I was producing that and co-creating that and going into environments that were feeding my own story. So this is where I am now. And I have founded the Self Healing Academy last year. I spoke it out, Self Healing Academy, and it's about committed leaders. And I call them self leaders because not every leader wants to lead from within or not yet. So, timing is also an issue. And I'm working with people who are exhausted, who have lost their connection, who are looking for lightness, joy, and who want to make an impact. And the impact can be small or big, it doesn't matter. And it's about reconnecting. Self healing is about guiding people and also teaching them that we are our own healers. So I'm not healing anybody. As I just said, I healed myself with the support of others, but I am my own healer. And so people can learn to observe themselves, change their self-perception, and shift their identity. I'm all into identity shifting. And my bigger mission, and it's with symptoms, without symptoms. I'm not a doctor here, but like the first symptom is sleepless nights. How many people have sleepless nights and feel that is okay?
Well, probably many are trying to power through, but dear listener, if you are one of them, what can they do?
Reconnect with what they are running away from. What
I
can
can
they
see
do?
why that is the name of your business, isn't it?
Reconnect. I
I mean,
want to
it's
say
what a
reconnect.
big part of your identity is now, reconnect. So definitely, that's a big. I can feel that there's a big commitment in you to helping people reconnect, and I feel the same. So is that really? I always like to ask that towards the end. Is that the purpose? Is that why because this work is not just to pay the bills. I think you do this work because of something deeper, which is so beautiful. So I'm always curious to find out what is keeping
Yes.
you going, because you could easily just say, I'm, done. I'm just going to go and enjoy my calm life now, my sleep full nights as opposed to the sleepless nights that you mentioned. And what is the purpose? What's driving you? What's the fire
The
within?
fire is peace. The fire is
Interesting.
really big. I'm a peacemaker. So
Okay.
the fire is bigger, the mission is bigger. When I talk about identity shift, I also go into not really overcoming, but connecting and overcoming separation. And separation, we have that on the collective. I mean, we see that everywhere. Division, divisiveness, and it
Mhm.
starts within. And a sleepless night is a divided version of myself with me. It's a relationship I have with myself. It's a relationship I have with my job. It's a relationship I have with money. It's a relationship I have. So, and if that's not clear to me, it's again, we are coming back to who am I on my deepest soul level? And who do I want to be? And as I said before, having a self-healing academy and teaching people and guiding people to feel, look into the stories that we believe, into the fears, what we also were talking about in the beginning, belonging, showing up, fearing rejection. These are big, and these are big collective beliefs. And I'm also here to break these collective patterns. This is also something like, it's not only me individually with my own story. There's a lot of collective beliefs. And one of the beliefs I came across when I was writing my chapter, but it was too big. Leaving is not an option. How many of us stay, or I stayed, because leaving was not an option in my mind that I could
It
leave?
just sounds, yeah, so bizarre, doesn't it? Because of course you live in a country where who you work with is a free choice. You can always leave. And if I'm sitting here and I'm like, what does she mean she couldn't leave? Of course she could resign. No one's forcing her to do this. But I think you're talking about something completely different here. The internal
The
permission.
internal permission, or the lack of the permission, that you can choose yourself, and that you can choose what lights up your heart, and that this is okay to do that, and that it's even benefiting everyone around us. I
Mm,
didn't know that before, but now with this conversation, we wouldn't be in this conversation if
yeah.
I would
Yeah, no,
still
and I
fear to speak, or to speak with you about all of this. I wouldn't be here, and we are holding back our gifts. And when we are holding back our gifts, we are also, taking away something from others. And I'm learning from others so much.
Yeah. Yeah. That's probably a beautiful place to end it, because I think you've given us so many lessons. And I think that that last one was very important, that there's so much information out there these days. We're so lucky. And of course, some of the information is maybe not ideal, it's not true. But then at the same time, and I heard this recently somewhere, you don't have to go to a library. It was really hard to get information or inspiration or even get access to art, to other people's thoughts, to creativity back in the day. It was just not available. It was only accessible to the selected few. And now everybody through their device, but whatever it is, can get access to so much, which is a challenge in itself. But we all have access, which means that we all have a choice. Of course, we can choose what kind of information we want to receive. It's a choice. You can choose one view or you can choose another. And I think also what I wanted to say is that yes, you left corporate, and I'll put the links in the show notes about the chapter that the book that you co-wrote, Corporate Calling,
Mhm.
and, of course, your website as well if people want to continue finding out more about you. But to me, there's always a message at the end. It's not just about leaving, and I'm sure you have some clients in your practice as well. It's not just about leaving the corporate world. It's not bad in itself, because your story shows that you left, and even so, technically you had left, escaped, right, whatever it is, you continued to fall back into the same patterns. So I just want to urge our listener here to be careful not to fall into the, oh, as soon as I leave, everything is solved. It could be, but it may not be. And that's where we have to be patient and be willing to put in the work.
Yeah, it's not about escaping.
Mm.
I think I was like escaping something, trying to find it outside until I came back. Or life guided me to come back to find it here within all the gifts we have. And no one says it's easy, and it's a journey, and let's enjoy the journey and be grateful for every interaction and for every gift. I feel gifted right now with this conversation. And you never know where it's going to lead us. And just speaking from the heart, showing up as who we are in this moment and knowing that we can evolve and change and choose. Definitely, it's about choices.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite authors, self-help authors, Beck Kempton says, the world needs your medicine. And I think that's a very nice way to summarize our conversation today. And the one lesson that I'm taking with me is that what you said something that really touched me about let's not fight. You made the big
Mhm.
what is the fire for you? It's peace. Whereas
Mhm.
usually we connect fire with explosion, with fight, with disaster, and we're talking about a different kind of fire here. And that narrative of fighting against everything is usually where that exhaustion, the sleepless nights starts. So hopefully that's something that our listener can take
Mhm.
away with them. But thank you so much. It's been so lovely to have you, Mariana. For those who are interested in finding out more, you can find all the information in the show notes, or if you're watching this on YouTube or on Substack, that will be in the comment section below. I am so happy that you've gifted us this conversation, Mariana. This really is for me that fire that we talked about that motivates me to carry on. And for all of our listeners, I would like to invite you to share. We love to hear from you. Put it something wherever you're watching or listening to this. Put something in the comments. Give us a heart, whatever it is, just so that we know this is reaching, this is helping you, this is useful. Maybe share your story. I'm always looking for new guests for the podcast. I'd love to hear from you if this fascinates you and you want to be a guest on the show. And again, a very big thank you to you, Mariana.
Thank you so much.